Hey guys, what's going on? It's your boy Cozy here, coming at you with another deck tech video, this time for an OP10 list, which is going to be probably the deck that I play 100% of the time. I think it's super fun and super exciting. It's going to be Smoker from OP10 Red Green. His basic effect is all of our Navy and Punk Hazard characters gain plus 1000 power on our opponent's turn, but the key thing is during our turn once per turn, if we have a character that's 7,000 or more in power, we get to restand 2 Rested Dawn, which is going to help us extend out these plays. The list that we're going to show today is actually very similar to the one that won the Asia final for Japan here recently, but I do have a couple of tweaks, and more importantly, this is to have more of a conversation on the deck, how it functions, kind of the lines of play that we want to look at, and then of course my input going into the North American meta. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look, starting with our 2Ks. All right, and so, like I said, we're going to start off by looking at our 2Ks here, which are going to be pretty much the lifeblood of it. We do run 12 of them, so it is super vital that we kind of use them when we need to, but we still have plenty in the deck so we can go and filter through and see them. Starting with the Piece de la Resistance, we have 4 of the Otama 2K. Very great for power reduction as well, especially when we get into our later turns and we want to start popping things or giving things minus power, and we can start removing things from the board a little bit easier. If we don't want to use it for that regard, it is a very solid 2K to have. The next card that we're going to look at is going to be a rare from OP10. I am going to assume that it is going to be a short print rare. It's going to be very hard to find, and when we do find it, it is going to be very costly, at least for the first little bit of market. This is cozy market speculation. I could be entirely wrong, and I hope I am wrong, because I need at least 2 play sets of this. It is going to be 4 copies of the Tony Chopper, which is also Sanji from Punk Hazard, by the way. He is a blocker, so he is very, very strong in this deck because we can just play him out, and he's going to pretty much stay alive for the most part, unless you're playing it as something black. Like Sakazuki hopefully comes off the ban list. Be on the lookout for that speculation video that's coming out here pretty soon on the channel. But it's also very strong because on an opponent's turn, he gains plus 2,000 power. So base stat, he's at 6,000 as a blocker. With Smoker, he becomes a 7k body just to block anything. So they have to swing at least 7, and even at that point, we're giving up a 1k, which is absolutely insane to see in a deck like this. Super defensive. And then lastly, another part of the deck, a huge lifeblood asset, is going to be the 3-drop Tashigi that we can play. Essentially, it is an anti-black card for a lot of our green characters that we play, because in the case where a green character would be removed from play by any means, bottom decking or by KO, we're just going to rest the Tashigi, and we're perfectly fine and safe. If I remember right how it works in the Lucci matchup, if you play the 4-drop Lucci, target this and something else that's a green character, the Tashigi is going to rest to protect the other character, and then KO itself from the Lucci target. So that is something to also keep in mind of. I could be wrong. If I am wrong, let me know down in the comments below. But essentially, this is your 2K lineup that I feel in the Asia final was really, really strong. I think it is going to be strong in the NA matchups going into things like Blackbeard, things like Rob Lucci, and a couple of the other decks. 12 2Ks is a very standard type of archetype that we see with our One Piece decks. So overall, I think it is a very strong format. Moving on to our characters, starting with our 1-drop. We only run a playset of the 1-drops, and that is going to be the Virgo Searcher that comes out in OP10. Look at the top 5, search for a Punk Hazard card, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic to see as we run quite a bit of Punk Hazard targets. So this card itself is very, very strong when searching and going first. List only does run 2 Monets. I think it's very important to have a Monet in this. It's a pseudo dragon in that regard, and it's not an on play, so it gets around the Blackbeard effect, where we're going to play the Monet, rest the Monet, move that 2 Dom we just spent on it somewhere else, so that way we can continue extending our plays going forward. And it also becomes a very good pseudo blocker because everybody wants to get rid of it as soon as we use the ability once. It's also a good resource sponge as well, because people are going to spend Dawn to remove it, either by effect or by bottom decking it, however the case is. Either way, they're spending Dawn on a resource that necessarily isn't going to be as impacting as they think initially, but I still think Monet is a very impactful card, though at 2, I think it's ideally where it wants to be. I wouldn't run it at 3 or 4, but I would say 3 at the most if you did want to run something similar to this of just moving and manipulating your Dawn plan. That would be the plan that I would go with. Next up, we do run the best blocker in the deck. It is going to be 4 copies of the Don Quixote Rocinante from OP05, I believe is where he's from. He's a blocker. He essentially does the same thing as Tashigi, except for any rested character. If they were to be KO'd, we can go ahead and trash this character instead to protect that character from being KO'd. And keep in mind that's any rested character, so that's going to be things like the Monet, things like the Virgo if we choose to swing with it, things like the Tashigi if we rest it, and then they work to get rid of it. Next up, we do run 4 copies of the new Sanji that comes out in OP10, who is in Nami's body thanks to Punk Hazard. On our turn, this card gains plus 3,000 power, so we only have to essentially invest 1 Dawn under Sanji, and we can activate our leader's effect to restand 2 Dawn, so that way we can continue extending plays, or it's just a nice 6k body to keep swinging into. And as a result, on KO, Sanji's going to replace himself by having us draw a card from it. So that's going to be something very, very important that either they can choose to get rid of it because now it's a 4k body on their turn because of the smoker effect, or they're going to allow us to keep attacking with 6,000 or even 7,000 and continue extending plays from there. After that, we do run 2 copies of Don Quixote Rocinante. That is bright. Let me move it over here for you guys. This one is from OP09. It is the Odyssey Rocinante. This is where my list differs a little bit from the national final, the Asia final that ended up winning with Red Green Smoker. In this particular slot, I believe he runs Baccarat, which is a 3-cost blocker in red. What I find to be a little bit more important for this particular matchup is with the Rocinante, you can choose to attack with it for 5, and then on opponent's attack, he restands and becomes a blocker. So I feel in the NA meta, we are a little bit more aggressive when it comes to our playstyle more personally. So I think going with this route to have an additional swing and still have that possibility of a blocker is very, very strong for Smoker. Though the Baccarat is still a good option in this particular slot because you can trash one of your 1Ks or a brick in your hand and it's going to become a 2K counter. So that is something to also keep in mind if you want to go more on the defensive / slower play style. I would recommend Baccarat in this particular slot. Now we get into our mid game, which is going to be kind of where this deck really starts to shine. We're going to start with 4 of the 5-drop Smokers from OP10. This card itself is absolutely fantastic to see. This deck lives and breathes by this card, essentially. So what we have here is, it is a 7k body for 5 Dawn as Banish, and activate main, we set 1 Dawn as active that was rested, even though we can't use any other character effects to do so. Does not matter, Smoker bypasses that. So essentially, on your 5 Dawn or 6 Dawn turn, you're playing Smoker, restanding 3 Dawn, and continuing to extend your plays to aim for something like a Tashigi, or Tashigi swing 7. You can go Tashigi swing 6. So there's a lot of different plays that you can do depending on what your board state is, but Smoker live and die by this deck lives and dies by this card, I feel. In the playtesting that I've done with some of my friends and things, that's going to be something that we kind of just take a look at and go into. And so that is the mid-game section here. I do want to kind of clear this up a little bit, and then we will hop into some of our late game, as well as the events that we do end up running in this particular deck. So starting with the later game cards, we do run 4 copies of Mr. Hody Jones himself. Great rusher, great game ender, especially when they have blockers in play, just to go ahead and bypass those blockers and just make sure that we can really finish off for game, because we can place Hody for 7, leave 3 Dawn up, use Smoker effect, go to 5 Dawn up, and then swing 8-10 or 9-9. That's going to be very hard for a lot of decks to counter, unless you're playing like BY Luffy, because then in that case you want to make sure that you one can whittle down their hand a little bit more, but more importantly, you would just go, if they're a 9k body, so 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, you would swing 13. That would require them to have 5k encounter, which, I mean, is possible in a deck like BY Luffy, but the likelihood of that being the case, especially as the game goes later and later into the matchup, I think this has a little bit more of an advantage into BY. I have yet to try it with BY. So if you guys are looking to get some games in with BY versus this particular deck, let me know. Join the Discord server down in the description below. Hit me up for some games, and I'll be more than happy to play with you guys with this deck so you can see how it works and operates. And then who knows, maybe we'll use it as part of the community building that we do together. We do run 4 copies of Ben Beckman in this deck. Like I said, with the Otama, it is something to kind of take notice of when it comes to like Otama. Put something down to a 6k body, and then we can play the Beckman for essentially 6, or essentially for 5, sorry, with Smoker effect. So we're playing Beckman for 5 essentially, but if we have Smoker out, it's Beckman for 4, which is just absolutely insane to have a big body like that for such little Dawn investment. And the rewards of it is you remove a pesky blocker, gets around the KO effects of things like the Sabo blocker, gets around Burgess as an example if the Burgess isn't too strong in Blackbeard's matchup. So a little bit of everything to kind of piece it together. And then last but not least, in our character lineup here, we do run 4 copies of the 8-drop Eustace Captain Kidd from OP10. This is a very, very strong character to have in this deck, because essentially what we're going to do is if we're going second, this is great because we can slam it down on our 8 Dawn turn, restand 2 from the Smoker effect, put 1 under the Kidd, still swing 6, and then play out like a blocker either to Shigi, the Rosinante, something that we want to do, just so that way we have the protection and the fortress build really locked in place. And that's going to do it for our character list here. What I do have now are the events that we run in this particular list. The first one is the Gum Gum Mole Pistol. This is from Starter Deck 21. I think this card is absolutely strong in this matchup, just in general, because it's going to give something minus 5,000 power, and then KO anything with 2,000 power or less if we have a 6k body on board, which, I mean, if we have the 3-drop Sanji, we're already there. If we have any of these characters out, we're already there. If we have the Smoker out, we're already there. And if we have Smoker out, this becomes a 1 Dawn investment to get rid of a bigger body. You could even go Otama minus 2k something, so we're now clearing out a 9k body for essentially 2 Dawn. 2 Dawn is absolutely ridiculous to KO a 9k body, so that Kaido, gone. That Jack, gone. So a lot of these more pesky bodies are going to be removed from the board for such a low Dawn investment. I think this card is absolutely amazing. I may tweak my list a little bit, add a 4th copy into it, because it does activate the main effect on trigger, so it is a really good trigger card to kind of see from there. Second to last, we do run 2 10-layer igloos from OP10. Essentially, it's just a counter, gives us a plus 3k in battle, and gives something a minus 2k in battle. So it's a 5k swing for just 2 Dawn. I think this is a very, very strong card. I think 2 is fine, maybe even 3 if you wanted to tweak the list a little bit more and kind of go from there. It's got a really good trigger effect. It is essentially a Rad Beam. It does the same thing, I believe, as Guard Point on trigger. It just gives our leader plus 1k for the turn. Add a little bit more defense if we want to make sure that we get there. But if we have the Dawn up, I would highly recommend just playing the Igloo rather than using the trigger. And then speaking of Rad Beam, we do run 1 copy of it. It's very nice to kind of see as a tech card. I think playing in a red deck, you do want to kind of see the Rad Beam, so leaving 1 Dawn open to kind of fake for it is something that's also very, very strong in terms of what mind games can you play with your opponents, and really driving home, like, oh, he has Rad Beam in him when you may not, and you kind of survive that additional turn because of a bluff. And then you really just take it home with like the Hody, the Kids, things like that. Even the Mole Pistol to get rid of something on board is just really, really strong to see as well. You could even run Mole Pistol if you have Sanji on board, KO like, or put minus 5,000 to something, and then play the Beckman to trash it if you could also go that route as well. But this essentially is a deck list that is 95% the same as the Japan final winner that ended up winning with Red Green Smoker. Like I said, that was the only small tech change I made going into the North American meta that I feel in my playtesting has happened. But if you guys are excited for OP10, let me know down in the comments below. If you have some ideas for Smoker that you want to try out, again, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy these types of deck tech videos and these deck conversations to kind of get your brain juices flowing for different deck ideas, let me know by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, ringing that notification bell, and I'll catch you guys in the next upload. Peace and love, y'all.